Around the time of conception, I had sex with another man.
You did?
Yes, Your Honor.
But did you also have sex with Mr. Livingston?
Yes, Your Honor.
To prove to your now ex-husband, Mr. Livingston, that he is not Jordan's biological father, that the only reason your ex-wife is denying you are the father is because she desperately wants to have a relationship with her ex-boyfriend, Mr. Dorschlag, the man your ex-wife claims to be Jordan's biological father.
My daughter, when she was born, she looked a lot like Mr. Livingston. She had dark hair and, she had some of his facial features, but as she got older, she got blonde hair. Neither Mr. Livingston nor I have blonde hair, but Mr. Dorschlag does. She started to look a lot like Mr. Dorschlag.
Yes, Your Honor.
Why are you so sure?
Because I was there through all of it. I was there through the doctor's appointments. I was there through the birth. Everything about that kid looks like me.
Sometimes the truth doesn't heal, it breaks, rebuilds, and redefines everything. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, where emotions collide with evidence, one DNA test becomes more than a result. It becomes the mirror of love, betrayal, and justice itself. In a courtroom where the boundaries between love and law blur into human emotion, Judge Lauren Lake presides not just as a legal authority, but as a voice of truth, compassion, and balance. This episode of Paternity Court opens with an air heavy with uncertainty. It's not just about proving fatherhood. It's about confronting the consequences of choices made in the quiet corners of relationships. Here, truth is not a statement, it's an earthquake. The DNA test stands at the center of this emotional storm. In most courtrooms, it's simply a piece of evidence, a number on paper. But under Judge Lake's gavel, it becomes a symbol of love questioned, promises broken, and the delicate dance between justice and humanity. People often take DNA tests searching for clarity, but few are ready for the price of knowing. As the episode unfolds, the question isn't just, who is the father? It's, what happens when truth changes everything? The Livingston story begins like many others, a connection formed, love promised, and a child born into hope. But the shadows of doubt grew alongside that child. When betrayal entered through the gateway of the internet, the emotional landscape shifted. Online messages, hidden chats, and unseen digital footprints became the unexpected witnesses in a marriage already strained by mistrust. What began as affection turned into accusation, and what began as commitment ended as a stage in a divorce case. Here, Judge Lauren Lake listens not as a detached arbiter, but as someone who understands that beneath the legal arguments lies something deeper, the relationship between law and justice. Law can define parenthood, but justice defines love. Law decides custody, but justice protects the soul of a child. As the mother confesses that she was with two men during the time of conception, the courtroom falls silent. There's no need for cameras to move. The truth itself is cinematic. She speaks of resemblance of hair color, of eye shades, as if genetics were the map to redemption. But Judge Lake knows better. Evidence lives not in emotion but in fact. And when facts are laid bare, the adverse inference in Evidence Act reminds us that silence, delay, or concealment can carry as much weight as testimony. In this space, every pause feels like a confession. The podcast listeners of The Game-Changing Attorney often speak about moments where legal battles transform into personal awakenings, where attorneys discover that their greatest cases are not in the courts but in their own hearts. That same reflection echoes here. Each witness, each statement, each submission to the court becomes part of a living study, the concept of justice in jurisprudence itself. Justice is not only the act of declaring a result, it is the willingness to confront one's truth. When the mother admits she doesn't know for sure who the father is, Judge Lake's gaze softens not from pity but understanding. She's seen this before. She's seen people regret taking the DNA test they once begged for, because truth can heal, but it can also humble. It can mend hearts or make them strangers forever. The paternity court is not just a legal stage. It's a reflection of real society, the emotional courtroom inside every person. And like the Divorce Course podcast, which explores how relationships unravel and rebuild, this case becomes an unfiltered exploration of accountability. It reminds viewers that divorce doesn't end relationships. It merely transforms them. When children are involved, the threads of connection stretch but never break. For Judge Lauren Lake, the case is more than another docket number. It's a call to examine how love turns into evidence and how evidence turns into truth. She often reminds litigants that DNA is only the scientific proof. It is not the definition of a parent. Parenthood, she says, is proven in consistency, compassion, and sacrifice. A man may not share a child's genes, but his actions may still bear the mark of fatherhood. As the first test results arrive, the courtroom breathes in unison. The DNA diagnostics envelope becomes a symbol of destiny, small enough to hold in one hand, powerful enough to change lives. This moment isn't just about who fathered a child. It's about who will take responsibility after the truth emerges. It's a moment that reflects every Supreme Court principle, that evidence without empathy is incomplete, and judgment without mercy is injustice. The results reveal that the man who doubted, who feared, who endured accusations is indeed the biological father. The courtroom erupts, not in chaos but in catharsis. The truth that could have destroyed now begins to rebuild. Judge Lake's voice steadies the room, reminding both parents that biology is only the beginning. Co-parenting requires grace, forgiveness, and a shared dedication to child support, not just in money, but in time, patience, and presence. It's here that the heart of this episode unfolds, where the narrative shifts from accusation to accountability. The concept of justice in jurisprudence isn't just about statutes or verdicts. It's about creating restoration from rupture. In Judge Lake's courtroom, justice wears a human face. As the episode transitions into the second case, one born from a dating site and a fleeting connection, the story transforms again. This isn't merely a DNA test cheating story. It's an exploration of how loneliness and digital intimacy create real-world consequences. When relationships begin with a message and end with a courtroom, the modern meaning of connection itself is put on trial. In this story, the truth once again changes everything. A man who believed he was just one of many possibilities faces the gravity of fatherhood when the DNA test proves he is the biological father. What started as avoidance becomes accountability. What started as denial becomes destiny. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom is not a place of punishment, it's a place of clarity. And clarity, as countless Celebrate Recovery testimonies reveal, is the first step toward healing. Every tear shed, every truth spoken, every verdict announced becomes part of a larger recovery story, one where justice doesn't end with the gavel, it begins there. As the mother admits her mistakes and the father learns the weight of responsibility, the story mirrors countless adoption stories, full episodes, where love is chosen, not inherited, where family is built not by DNA, but by devotion. These moments remind us that parenthood is not just proven in court, it's lived every day after the verdict. Through the voices, pain, and revelations of these litigants, Judge Lake creates what many legal scholars call empathic jurisprudence, where the relationship between law and justice becomes personal, almost spiritual. It's what separates her courtroom from all others. She listens, she challenges, she heals because justice, when done right, doesn't humiliate, it humanizes. And as the paternity court camera closes on the judge's final words, urging cooperation, forgiveness, and faith, the story lingers long after the credits. Because every viewer, every listener, every parent who's ever doubted, feared, or loved through uncertainty understands that this isn't just an episode, it's a mirror. a reflection of how fragile truth can be and how necessary it is to face it. Just as the Game-Changing Attorney podcast teaches that great advocates change the world one case at a time, Judge Lauren Lake reminds us that great parents change the world one child at a time. Her courtroom isn't about punishment, it's about potential. Every gavel strike is a reminder that the law doesn't end when the case is closed, it lives on, in the families who choose to begin again. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, every story unfolds like a layered confession, truth, denial, evidence, and emotion tangled in ways the law alone can't untie. The walls of her courtroom have heard the echoes of broken promises and the cries of redemption. But in this second half of the double episode, those echoes grow louder. They merge into something bigger, a reflection on how deeply one decision, one truth, one DNA test can change the course of multiple lives. The cases might seem different, one rooted in marriage and betrayal, the other born from chance and connection. Yet both reveal the same universal truth, that people regret taking the DNA test not because they feared the result, but because they feared losing the illusion that once held them together. When a mother or father steps forward in this court, they don't just submit to scientific proof, they step into emotional exposure. A DNA test doesn't just reveal paternity, it exposes motive, insecurity, faith, and fear. It forces individuals to face who they've been, not just who they are. And in that confrontation, truth changes everything. Judge Lauren Lake stands firm at the intersection of logic and empathy. She's a judge who listens as deeply as she rules, someone who knows that no law can heal a broken heart, but compassion can help people start again. That's the foundation of her philosophy, that the relationship between law and justice must always be humane, because while the law may determine the father, only justice can restore the family. In this double episode, we see both sides of that truth, one family breaking under the weight of suspicion, and another rebuilding through revelation. In the Livingston case, the courtroom becomes a stage of redemption. The once estranged couple now faces an undeniable reality. The man who was doubted, dismissed, and divorced is in fact the father. But that revelation, though legally clarifying, brings emotional chaos. It's here that Judge Lake's insight transcends law and moves into jurisprudence, into the moral reasoning behind justice itself. She reminds both parents that knowing the truth is not the same as living it, that co-parenting is a continuous act of forgiveness, that a divorce case may end a marriage, but it must not end a child's sense of family. In that moment, the episode quietly transforms from confrontation to reflection. It feels less like a TV courtroom and more like a living classroom of ethics, where Judge Lake becomes both teacher and healer. Her message is clear. DNA may determine the facts, but only love can define the future. Outside the world of the show, her lessons resonate across other platforms, in conversations echoed on the Divorce Course podcast, where guests dissect the pain, process, and growth that follow separation. Those who listen to such discussions understand that divorce is not failure. It's the painful rearrangement of what love leaves behind. In both the podcast and the courtroom, one truth remains constant. The emotional cost of truth is high, but the cost of deception is higher. The evidence presented in these cases, text messages, photographs, timelines, might seem like fragments of modern life, but under scrutiny, they become the architecture of justice. Judge Lake uses every fragment not to humiliate, but to illuminate. She examines them with the precision of a jurist and the compassion of a counselor, because every piece of evidence tells a story not just of what happened, but of why it happened. That is where the adverse inference in Evidence Act becomes relevant in principle. When someone withholds truth, avoids tests, or manipulates communication, the silence itself becomes testimony. In Judge Lake's courtroom, avoiding responsibility is as revealing as confessing. Her mastery lies not in punishing mistakes, but in transforming them into lessons. This is where law touches philosophy, where the concept of justice in jurisprudence reveals its depth. Justice is not the same as legality. Legality asks, "What happened?" Justice asks, "Why did it happen and how can we repair it?" In this courtroom, both questions matter equally. In the Collins versus Stone case, that repair begins with disbelief. The man who vanished, who assumed the child couldn't be his, finds himself face to face with undeniable truth. He is the father. It's not anger that defines this revelation, it's transformation. It's the shift from avoidance to acceptance, from denial to duty. And once again, truth changes everything. For viewers and listeners alike, this moment hits differently. It's not just about the science of parenthood, it's about the soul of accountability. The way Judge Lauren Lake delivers that truth, steady, respectful, and profoundly human, turns the verdict into something greater than a ruling. It becomes a celebrate recovery testimony, one that belongs not to religion but to human resilience. Because recovery isn't only for those battling addiction, it's for anyone reclaiming themselves after the wreckage of truth. These courtroom stories remind audiences that recovery begins the moment we stop running from reality. Whether it's a parent accepting their role, a partner admitting their fault, or a family redefining its boundaries, recovery is what gives justice a heartbeat. This is why Paternity Court continues to resonate long after the credits roll. It's more than entertainment, it's emotional jurisprudence. The viewers who follow Judge Lake's cases often find themselves reflecting on their own relationships, mistakes, and second chances. Each case becomes an emotional sermon, not from a pulpit but from the bench. And in today's world, where podcasts like The Game-Changing Attorney discuss how empathy, strategy, and truth reshape the legal profession, Judge Lake's work feels like its natural extension. She doesn't just apply the law, she humanizes it. She brings the relationship between law and justice into sharp focus, reminding every litigant that fairness without compassion is just calculation. The Supreme Court, in its grand halls, may interpret constitutional justice, but in this small, emotionally charged courtroom, Judge Lauren Lake interprets human justice. She reminds us that equality, respect, and accountability are not written in books. They're written in how we treat one another when the truth hurts the most. When the DNA test reveals the truth, silence falls not out of shock but out of recognition. Because deep down, the human heart always knows. What science confirms, the spirit often suspects. The man who doubted, the woman who defended, and the child caught in between all become witnesses to truth's power to both divide and unite. It's this transformation that draws parallels with adoption stories we often see in full-length features and emotional interviews. Those stories, like these courtroom cases, show that family is not limited by biology. Whether through adoption, reconciliation, or rediscovery, love finds a way to rebuild. And that rebuilding is the quiet essence of every Paternity Court episode. Through every verdict, Judge Lauren Lake redefines what it means to serve justice. She serves not just rulings, but renewal. She serves guidance to those lost in the maze of emotional and legal uncertainty. Her words resonate like those of a mentor, teaching both sides that parenting after pain is possible, that forgiveness is the truest form of child support. Child support, she reminds them, isn't just financial. It's emotional maintenance. It's showing up for birthdays, for report cards, for quiet conversations. It's the long, unending commitment to presence. And that presence in her courtroom is celebrated as the highest act of love. There's something profoundly cinematic about the way Judge Lake transitions from judgment to empathy, from ruling to reflection. She doesn't end her sessions with mere closure. She ends them with direction. She tells parents to communicate, cooperate, and commit, to remember that while the courtroom ends the argument, it begins the responsibility. That responsibility is what holds society together, the unseen bond between justice and morality. The concept of justice in jurisprudence is often described as abstract, but in this courtroom, it's alive. It breathes through the voices of mothers who confess, fathers who return, and children who finally find their names anchored in truth. The episode stands as a masterclass not only in law but in healing. It reflects a rare kind of wisdom, one that recognizes that every courtroom victory still carries a cost. Sometimes that cost is pride. Sometimes it's comfort. But always it's worth paying because in the end, truth changes everything. And that's what makes Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom so compelling. It's not the drama of revelation, it's the dignity she restores after it. The way she transforms a public reckoning into a private redemption. The way she ensures that even those who lose the argument leave with something far more valuable, understanding. The paternity court may be filmed under bright lights, but its greatest illumination comes from within, from the hearts that finally learn what it means to face the truth without fear. In every courtroom, there's a moment when sound fades, when words, arguments, and defenses become meaningless. All that's left is truth. And in Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, that silence isn't empty. It's sacred. It's the moment when truth changes everything. By the end of this emotional double episode, every heart in the room has been tested, not just by DNA, but by conscience. The Livingston case taught that love can survive even after betrayal if it's anchored in honesty. The Collins versus Stone case revealed that fatherhood can begin even after years of denial if one finds the courage to accept responsibility. Together, they remind us that justice, when humanized, becomes not just a verdict but a healing process. As the final act unfolds, Judge Lake's voice becomes softer, yet stronger, the tone of a woman who's seen pain transform into purpose countless times. She reminds the families that the courtroom is not a battlefield. It's a bridge. A bridge between law and empathy, between evidence and emotion, between yesterday's mistakes and tomorrow's redemption. For many watching, these moments echo deeply because they mirror their own lives. Across living rooms, phones, and streaming screens, viewers silently recognize themselves in these testimonies, the doubts they've buried, the apologies they've postponed, the love they've taken for granted. The stories we see on paternity court are not faraway dramas. They are reflections of the universal human struggle to balance truth with forgiveness. It's why so many legal thinkers call Judge Lake's show the emotional classroom of justice. Here, jurisprudence comes alive not through abstract theories but through lived experience. When she speaks about the concept of justice in jurisprudence, she doesn't quote philosophers, she shows it. Every case, every test result, every tear becomes a living lecture in ethics, accountability, and redemption. In the aftermath of truth, both families stand before her, some relieved, some broken, all changed. And that's when the second layer of justice begins, restorative justice. It's the part that law books often skip, but Judge Lake never does. She knows that justice doesn't end when the DNA result is read. It begins when people choose what to do with it. In the Livingston family, the father who was once doubted stands taller, not with pride, but with peace. He doesn't gloat. He simply exhales. He was right, but he also realizes that being right doesn't mean being whole. The truth brought him clarity, but it also brought him responsibility. He must now co-parent with the same woman who once questioned his fatherhood, not for himself, but for the child whose future depends on their cooperation. Judge Lake looks at them both and reminds them, children don't care who was right, they care who stayed. It's a sentiment that has echoed through countless Celebrate Recovery testimonies, where people speak not of victories but of growth, where they admit that accountability is not weakness but strength. In the second case, Mr. Stone, the once absent father, now holds the weight of reality in his hands. His life changed in a moment. One line of scientific text transformed him from a possibility into a parent. And though the camera doesn't show his full thoughts, his eyes reveal it, the realization that his name now carries a new meaning, Father. There's no applause, no dramatic ending, only acceptance. And in that acceptance lies the quiet beauty of justice. Across the digital world, as podcasts like the Divorce Course podcast and the Game-Changing Attorney dissect the emotional anatomy of law, they all return to one truth: justice isn't just about winning, it's about transforming. Every verdict that Judge Lake delivers becomes a microcosm of that transformation. It's law not as punishment, but as guidance, not as authority, but as restoration. Because real justice doesn't shame, it teaches. It doesn't divide, it directs. And in her courtroom, every parent learns that forgiveness is the ultimate verdict. As the credits would roll for most viewers, the deeper reflection begins, one that transcends television and touches philosophy. The relationship between law and justice becomes the spine of this entire narrative. Law exists to preserve order, but justice exists to preserve humanity. Law delivers judgment, justice delivers understanding. And when both meet, as they do in this courtroom, healing begins. That's what separates Paternity Court from other legal shows. It's not about spectacle, it's about soul. The camera doesn't chase chaos, it captures clarity. It documents how evidence can illuminate emotion, how the coldest proof can lead to the warmest truths. Each DNA test here represents more than a scientific confirmation.